Welcome to the Mike on Much podcast. I'm your host, Mike Veerman, and I'm here for the first time ever without Max, our pop culture aficionado, Shane Cunningham. Shane, what's going on?
Nothing, as we discussed before we hit record on this.
That's right. We're just winging it. So the reason that it's just Shane and I for the first bit is because our friend and trusty producer, Max Kerman, is on the road with Arkells, and he is not here at the moment, but he's going to be calling in.
It's funny because without him, normally the structure is you and him chatting away.
It's true.
But so we kind of just anticipated we could wing it. But without Max, I do feel a little lost here off the top.
He's a chatty Cathy.
Yeah.
That being said, we are going to be talking to Max on the road in a little bit. And today on the show, we have TJ Miller, which is super exciting. Once we have Max on the phone, we're going to be talking a bit about what it was like to interview TJ Miller, Shane, and myself, which we'll be getting into. But yeah, anything been going on in your life, Shane?
A lot of stuff. Most of it has been related to the digital dessert segments, actually. So
okay,
might save that for the setup.
Let's save it. All right. Well, I recently went to a Raptors game with my brother Greg.
Heard of him?
You've heard of him. You know him.
Went to high school with him.
You did go to high school with him. Thoughts on my brother Greg?
He was a very like-minded guy to me, and I would think that he was my my best friend in high school.
Were you guys popular in high school? I know the answer to these questions, but our listeners don't, maybe.
Well, I don't know. I think you might have the idea that I was more unpopular than I was.
I don't think that.
Well, I was a year older than Greg, so I was in the grade above him. But I was I've always been friends with the most popular people in school. So I was in a weird section where I was friends with, there's this guy, Tim Gent, and there was the Leggetts, who were probably ran the school. They were kind of like the wealthier, more popular kids like you'd expect in high school. And I was their really close friend, and I was always shooting videos with them or doing the morning announcements with this guy Bram, who was really popular. And they would ride the drop top Mustangs into school, and I'd be with them. So
are you sure you're not talking about Beverly Hills 90210?
Yeah, exactly. For me, it was kind of like that. And then, there was this group of popular girls, and I was dating one of them who was in the popular group. Although I was still kind of a weirdo, I would put myself in the category of popular weirdo. Whereas Greg, he was more on the outskirts, being a grade lower. He was, I guess, considered more of an outsider just because unlike you, Greg's more of an introverted personality.
Sure.
But I found more common ground with Greg than I did a lot of the popular people. And then obviously Greg kind of blossomed into this cool dude in his 20s, as tends to happen with a lot of people who are kind of outsiders in high school. They kind of find their footing in their 20s.
Well, one of Greg's sort of defining character traits is that he's a bit of a pessimist.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think he ever thinks anything's going to work out. So we were at this Raptors game. They were playing the Washington Wizards, who are good. And this year, I don't know if listeners have been following along, I'm a 1/4 season ticket holder. So I've got 11 games to bring people to. Shane, I'm bringing you to the Lakers game in, I think, January or something like that.
I'm pumped.
So Greg and I go to this game. First of all, he'd gone out the night before, decided to go out and burn it down until God knows what hour. So I know that I'm going to this basketball game with my brother the next day. And I'm like, oh, is he going to even be in the mood for drinks? I don't know. So the game starts, it's 6 o'clock start. He's like, dude, I think I'm going to pass on the beers tonight. And I'm like, oh, man, he threw it all away Saturday night, which is fine. We've all done it. But again, I'm taking him to the game for free. I'm not charging him for the tickets. So I'm like, well, I'm still going to go grab a beer. And he's like, cool, man.
So you might think that Greg might pay for your beer?
What's the general rule if somebody takes you to a basketball game?
Well,
I paid for the tickets.
Greg is, to put it nicely, notoriously cheap. Also, there was, just to digress for a second, there was a story when we were 20, Greg and I went to California, and we were going to be on The Price is Right as in the audience. But if you're an audience member, they also do a thing where they kind of double dip. They audition you to see if you're going to be on the show. They give you a 10-second audition. If you're wearing an army base outfit or something, you're more likely to be on the show. So we kind of made a pact going in. If one of us gets on, we will split any of the prizes down the middle. In the unlikely event that not only are we to get on the show, but are we to win some big grand prize? We all agreed. There was 6 of us on the trip, except for Greg. Greg said, I'm not doing it, man. He goes, I'm keeping it for myself.
He was the one holdout.
Yeah.
Who wouldn't split his winnings.
And we all kind of hated him at that moment, which I'm sure you kind of hated your brother Greg when he wouldn't get you the beer.
I was confused. I was just, but I wasn't going to bring it up. So I just kind of like quietly bought my own beer. And then we go and sit down. And then so like the first half's happening. And it's one of those big beers. So now I'm kind of starting to like kick in. I'm getting into it. I'm being very vocal, yelling at the team to get back on defense. So I guess Greg at this point is like, you know what? He's like, maybe I will have a beer because he starts to get excited. So now it's kind of a moment of truth where he's like, where are you at? You want another one? I'm like, yeah, I'd take another one. And then he went out and he got us 2 big beers.
Oh, surprise ending. Okay.
Surprise ending. But sort of what speaks to his pessimism what started this story is that throughout the whole thing, he just expects the Raptors to choke it up. For long-suffering Raptors fans, they've historically been bad. This has been a good 5-year run for them, but they still tend to blow it in big moments or whenever you expect them to succeed.
So do you think Greg is a pessimist or more of like a painful realist?
It's a great question.
Because sometimes, I'll send Greg stuff and I for his approval. Because when Greg says something's good, it really does feel good because he can be so honest.
Absolutely.
So I kind of think he might just be more realistic than a lot of people want to hear. Sometimes when you want to hear that comforting thought, Greg won't necessarily provide it for you. But he's a great guy to go to when you actually want like the straight goods on something.
Sure, but if you're going through a painful breakup, terrible brother to have.
Yeah, or if you need someone to buy you a beer, yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, the game was a bit of a seesaw, and I was like, Greg, the Raptors. So right off the top, the Raptors were being blown out by 20 points. Greg's like, I knew it. This shit happens all the time. But then the Raps would come back, and I'm like, I was kind of doing an Instagram story throughout. Like, I'm like, Greg, it's starting to happen. He's like, I've seen this show before. And basically, at every stop, he just wasn't going to allow himself to start to believe. And then in the end, they got it to like 4 points, and it was really exciting. And then, of course, they ended up losing the game. And Greg sort of, as Greg does, had this very satisfied kind of, you see, man, that's what happens. It's like you get all riled up, you believe in something, and this is how the world always turns out. Now, I guess my question is, one, I do find that kind of endearing in Greg, and I think we all find it pretty funny that that's kind of his outlook. And he wins, but by losing.
Yep.
You know what I mean? It's like, well, you can't hurt if you never feel. I don't want to live that way, man. I want to believe that it's going to happen. I want to hope that it's all going to work out.
Yeah, me too. I find, though, you can't really help how you want to live. You either are or you aren't.
Right.
And I have moments where I'm definitely more of a Greg person than I am a positive person.
Yeah.
Want to call Max?
Let's do it.
We made a pact. If there was 3 seconds of awkwardness, we would call Max.
We're doing it. Now is the time to call Max and see how things are going on the road. But hey, listeners, are you an optimist? Are you a pessimist? Just do you. All right. We are now in the studio and calling Max.
Hello.
Maxie.
How's it going, boys?
Good. How you doing, man?
I'm in Covington, Kentucky, just across the river from Cincinnati, and I'm in a Courtyard Marriott hotel. They gave me this meeting room, so it's totally silent. So I'm feeling pretty good. I got my act together.
You requested the meeting room just to do this pod?
Yeah, I was gonna do it in our hotel room, but then Mike D was having a shower, and Tim was having a shower, and everyone's having a damn shower, so there was no quiet. So I want to make this as pro as possible.
Are you guys still splitting rooms on the road?
You know what? We're in a bus, so we are driving overnight. So these are kind of just like shower rooms, basically. So no one's actually sleeping in any hotel rooms.
What do you mean a shower room? How does that work?
Just a hotel room that we use during the day that everyone showers in. But because the bus leaves at 2 a.m. after the show, no one's actually sleeping in a hotel room at night.
Do you guys conserve water?
Shane had some concerns about your water conservation.
Are you conserving it?
You know what? We do take note of little signs in the bathrooms, and we're doing our best to reuse towels when we can, etc. Yes.
My implied joke was that you're all showering together, but that's fine.
I missed that. Sorry.
I missed that one too. Actually, I thought you actually just were environmentally conscious. So tell us, what city were you in again, sir? I'm a bad host for missing that.
No, we're in Cincinnati. The tour's been good though. We came from Cleveland yesterday, and we were in Detroit, Chicago, St. Louis, and Kansas City the day before. So overall, it's been good. The crowds are getting better and better. We had a day off in Cleveland, which is very cool. Actually, in Cleveland yesterday, Nick decided to get a haircut, and if anyone knows Nick is like the least sort of pampered guy ever. He's almost like the most like monk-like dude, you know, like he doesn't want for anything. He's not into material goods. Like when the band started, we had to have like, I don't know, about 6 months of conversations about the virtues of skinny jeans if you're going to be a rock band. Like he just didn't quite understand why it was important. He's come around. But anyway, so Nick decided to get a haircut, and I guess the closest barber was like an African-American barbershop. And
does he have a flat top now?
He has a flat top. Yeah.
He doesn't quite have a flat top, but the barber, I guess, asked him if he wanted to, if he was trying to grow a mustache and if he wanted to clean it up. So the mustache is like a very thin, like Prince-like mustache.
I love it.
It's really delightful. And yeah, so Nick's looking amazing. What else is going on? We played in St. Louis, and we got to hang with our boy Scotty Upshaw, who plays for the St. Louis Blues, and he gave us tickets to the game. They were playing the Leafs, and Scotty Upshaw, I will say, is kind of like the NHL version of me. He's very gregarious. He's like, no, you know, I shouldn't say it's like me because I'm about to compliment him a lot, and that's going to sound like I think really highly of myself.
He's just wonderful. He's exactly like me.
Yeah, he's a gregarious, beautiful guy. And what I mean to say is that he just is full of sort of joy and affection for everybody. And he was saying that, you know, he arranged for our song "Knocking at the Door" to be played in the arena and to like show us on the big screen, which is what happened. But it happened to take place in the second period, just before he was about to take a face-off against Austin Matthews. And when he heard the song, he was like, oh man, I want this to keep playing. So he told me he was about to ask the ref for more time so he could change his stick because he was going to make up an excuse that his stick was broken. And so he said after the game, the coach put on the whiteboard that there are optional workouts after the game if ever anybody wants to get another workout in. And then he said he erased that on the board and said there's a non-optional mandatory concert that everybody has to come to with to see the Arkells. And so he brought like half the team to the show. We all hung out afterward. So it was cool to see a dude like that who's played in the NHL for 13 years, just sort of like really enjoying the fruits of his labor, and like just like he definitely thinks about things outside of hockey, which is kind of refreshing. So shout out to Scotty Upshaw. But what's going on? What's going on back home? I miss you guys.
Well, I mean, Max, we miss you too. But I guess the biggest thing that's going on is today on the show we have TJ Miller.
That's right. Big American comedy celeb.
For our listeners, TJ's on tour right now across Canada doing a stand-up show, but you know him probably most famously from Silicon Valley. Max, do you watch Silicon Valley?
Of course, yeah. I love Silicon Valley.
Do you think the show will miss him a lot?
I think so. But what I'm more interested in is because Shane's Digital Dessert is out, and I don't know the backstory. I want to know, you know, what happened in the room that day when you guys were making him feel very uncomfortable.
Yeah, well, first of all, for our listeners, if you haven't seen these, Shane, since basically Coachella, has been doing these digital desserts where he does these kind of 5-minute pieces where he hangs out with someone that's come on the show, whether it was the first one was Melissa Merck, and then it was an NBA player, Nick Stauskas, and then most recently TJ Miller. Shane, what's the impetus of it? And
Well, the impetus would be when we were in Coachella, Max says, why don't you make fun of digital celebrities? But I guess you wouldn't want it worded that way. But yeah, you know, I think Max, like with love, he wanted me to tease maybe people who were popular on Instagram, etc. So originally it was called Shane's Digital Dessert in the Desert because we were in the desert at the time. Now we've dropped the desert and just call it Shane's Digital Dessert.
yeah.
Yeah, I did one actually the day before TJ Miller. And when I'm writing these, you know, it's pretty intense. I research the artist. I run things by my wife. She sits down, we type it all out. Then we reorder the questions. Then I practice the questions. Then she pretends that she is the interviewee. And then I practice about 15 different scenarios on how the interview could go wrong to prepare when it inevitably does. So there was this other artist named Max. Just M-A-X. Doesn't need a last name because I guess there's only really one popular Max in music. So that was a joke.
Yeah, I caught it.
I was nervous about that joke.
Well, that Max will be on the show in 2 more episodes. So he will be coming on the show. He's a very popular artist and singer.
So a lot of his videos had like 20 million views. He was this very popular guy. So I went in there with this whole game plan. It was almost a rehearsal for the TJ Miller one. And then this Max guy is so charming and articulate. he really threw me off my game. I had this long intro prepared, and then he kept cutting me off at every second and then interjecting with like little witticisms and things. And I was like, holy shit, like this guy's not even TJ Miller, and this guy's kind of kicking my ass verbally. I better really change my game plan for the TJ Miller one. So I go back to the drawing board with my wife, and I'm like, okay, we got to totally like flip the script, and we got to make it way more bold, and I need to up my confidence level, because the character I play on the digital dessert, it's kind of like a faux confidence with a little bit of nervousness.
Yeah.
But to compete with TJ Miller, I thought I'd kind of have to up my confidence level, because he's a high octane dude and fully capable of steamrolling any interview. And by the way, he has a track record of doing that with morning show hosts.
Mm-hmm.
If you check YouTube, there's like all these skits where he has this bit where he pretends like he's drinking water and spills it all over himself and spits all over everybody. It's like his classic bit.
He actually did it to Ben Mulrooney on Your Morning, which you can see on the Instagram.
Right. So I'm kind of overly worried about the TJ Miller one, and I don't want to offend him because he's a big celebrity and he's a comedic kind of genius who started his career in improv. So I'm overly stressed about this one, and I was super worried about the Max one, who has none of those comedic qualities. So I want to get to the place where we're shooting about 20 minutes beforehand so I can set up the fart machine. Because as you know, you've seen the bit, and I had a plan where when TJ's talking, I was going to deploy a fart machine. So at home, when I practiced with the fart machine, I found that it had its best, most realistic fart noise when it had a cushion underneath it. So we get to the area where we're presuming TJ's going to sit, and I put the fart machine under a cushion that's sitting nearby on the couch. And I hit the fart machine like the detonator that it's a portable remote control that I carry in my hand. And when I hit it, you can barely hear the fart noise in the room for some reason. And I'm like, TJ might not even be able to hear this. He's going to be talking so loudly over it. So I'm like, I'm going to have to hide the fart machine somewhere in the open. Then I noticed there's a bunch of picture frames kind of above where TJ is going to be sitting. So I'm like, perfect. I'm just going to tuck it in perfectly behind the picture frame. And I'm asking Webmaster Dan's there and Mike are there. And they're like, oh, are you sure that's the best spot for it? I'm like, I'm sure. I'm like, what do you guys think? They're like, oh, I don't know. And I'm like, trust me, guys, I'm confident in this placement. Mike's like, that fart machine better not go off when I'm interviewing. I go, it won't. He's like, how do you know? I go, because I have a detonator in my hand, and I'll keep it away from me during the interview. It won't go off. So TJ walks in, and I, nervously, like my hands are sweating like crazy because I'm just trying to memorize everything I'm going to say. I'm so worried about. I just shake his hand like a nerd and kind of just sit down out of the way. Because in a way, even my nervousness, I'm trying to disarm him even more when I actually do kind of spring this confident character on him. So as the whole interview's going on, I'm just, going over my lines. And then Mike says, last question. And I'm like, oh, shit, like it's almost game time for old Shaney boy. And then TJ starts answering this really, like he gets kind of in a more serious mood and starts giving a really serious answer to Mike's question. All of a sudden, there's a crash, and the fart machine has knocked over the picture frames that were over TJ's head, and the frame has hit TJ in the head. So instead of being worried about, like, you'd think I'm like, oh, it hit TJ, that's really bad, it could have hurt him. I'm just like, shit, now the fart machine is fully exposed. So I don't know what to do. So I just walk over to TJ like I'm Mike's assistant, and I just stick my hand out, and TJ comments like, what the just happened? Is that because things got serious or something like that? And then he hands me the picture frame, and I just take it, put it away. And then Mike can sense that, this is weird. If the fart machine is exposed, this is going to be bad for Shane's whole bit. And Mike just witnessed the day before me kind of implode during a digital dessert that went wrong.
I definitely didn't want him to see the fart machine just because I knew how lovingly and painstakingly you had crafted that bit.
Well, yeah, and like I was saying, when it goes bad, it's really uncomfortable. So, and like, hey, yeah, we screwed it up with Max a little bit, but this is TJ Miller.
Yeah.
If we bomb this bit, it's going to be a bad reflection on you also.
Sure.
So if he had seen a fart machine, and he might just say, what the is that? I don't want to do a bit where an interviewer is using a fart machine.
Yeah.
Like, comedy aside. But once we ended up doing, he rolled with it, and he was very generous with his time and extremely nice afterwards.
What was, tell me what he was like after, because like if you watch the bit, you could tell he's like pretty thrown off and he's trying to be real with you. He's like, a second ago, you're just a nice, normal guy. Now you're acting like a psychopath. What the hell is going on? What was he like afterward?
It's kind of funny because it's like there's TJ when he arrives, which is its whole thing, and then you do the whole interviews, and then there's TJ after. And he sort of came in like off the top. Like, we don't know what to expect. Like Shane says, you watch the other interviews, you know what he's kind of like energy-wise and sort of like, you know, his willingness to steamroll an interviewer or take control. And he's doing this whole press tour. So he comes in, he's got a lot of energy, and he's kind of like, it's his natural, I think, disposition to just sort of like take over the room. So then for me as the interviewer, because I'm going first, it's like you got to try and wrangle that a little bit and find out the spots to jump in, you know? And so this was kind of one of the more challenging ones just because it's like, oh, you know, he comes in and the first thing he sees is this WeWork, which is like this kind of business office. You'll hear about this in the interview. And he sort of decides to start threading throughout these callbacks to it. So it really took me like 10, 15 minutes to even get around to like getting into a real conversation. But then we finally settled in, and then that's when the fart machine knocked over the picture frame and almost concussed TJ Miller. And then Shane does his whole bit, and then
Afterwards, he just said, "Man, that was hilarious," and it was so flattering that he said that. I almost wanted to keep it in the bit, just because I want people to see that. But it does ruin the illusion of the awkwardness a little bit that TJ went along with it.
I think you ended it at the right spot. I think it was good. I think people come to the pod to peel back the onion, but people come to the digital dessert, you know, to be charmed and shocked.
And I think enough people know that it's a shtick. At least that's my hope.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it was really good. Also, I love the idea of anybody watching that interview that you did with him, and then also this idea that you were like cramming and studying different fart noises and rehearsing the questions for like hours on end. Like, those two things next to each other are hilarious.
So, TJ Miller on the road right now with the Just for Laughs tour. Go online, find the dates, go see TJ Miller, man. And I think right now we're going to get to the interview. You guys want to get to it?
Let's do it. Good work.
It's a fart noise.
Yeah. You did stand up at an adult summer camp?
You had to pick up the mic for that one. It was this really strange thing where they hired me and I think The Weeknd.
He does stand up now?
It's one of and I'm also doing cool pop hip hop. Anyway, so these guys hired me, and it was for WeWork, and I had never heard of it. I didn't know anything about it. But they're one of these tech companies that's probably valued at like $100 million, and they haven't gone public or any of that sort of stuff. Basically, what the show I used to be on makes fun of, and they were all like partying really hard. And I was drinking with them, and, you know, we smoked a little bit. And then one of the dudes, these guys were the nicest guys. One of the dudes explained to me what it was, which is essentially just a shared office space with free Red Bull. And he sort of explained it. And then he was like, you got to hear the story of the name. And then all of his buddies were like, tell him the story. Tell him the story about how we named it WeWork, right? So they're all just jazzed up, and his whole, you know, crew was like, tell it. And he goes, so we were partying really hard one night. And he points this one guy, I don't know his name necessarily, but he was like, and Jake. So Jake passes out before all of us, right? So we're all partying, we're staying up, because those guys really know how to have a good time. They're like, so we were all like still hanging out, partying, and then all of a sudden Jake just like comes out of a deep sleep, and he's like, and he goes, what do? We love, we play, we work. And then there was this like pause for me to be like, yeah! And it just didn't come, because I realized that, you know, I do this all the time. I do shows, I do movies that I haven't read the script, you know, for them. The only script I read was Unstoppable, I think. Nowadays, they don't even let you. But I realized I didn't understand even after he explained it what it was. So the story was basically just like about how they came up with the worst name in the world. And they were so jazzed for me to be like, that's an amazing story. And it was not. But every single month, I see another WeWork space popping up. And I'm like, I guess it worked.
They're doing it, man.
I guess we work. I guess we love, we play, we party, we work.
Did you give them the response they wanted, though, in that moment?
No, I just was like, what are you talking about?
You just...
Also, everybody's so high. So it's like they weren't offended. They just thought maybe I was too high to like get what a great story it was.
Yeah.
But it was so Silicon Valley. You know, I mean, they hired me because I was from Silicon Valley, because they were, again, a tech company that didn't get that we're making fun of them, but instead they're one of the many companies that is like, yeah, finally people are like doing a show about our lives. We're the most important thing that's going on right now.
We're being represented, man.
Yeah, yeah. So, they had that kind of, I don't know, they had that air to the whole experience, but it was really funny. And it was outdoors. You know, occasionally I do stand up. This is why this tour is going to be so great, because it's appropriate venues, but occasionally they'll book a stand up and they don't understand anything about stand up.
Sure.
So it was like on an outdoor stage, two people that were just like standing in the mud because it had been raining. And I was supposed to like, put on a great set, and all I did was just improvise. Kind of like what I'll do here, which is just each show is different because so much of it is riffing and talking about the crowd and the situation, all that stuff. But that was mostly just me being like, this is a terrible situation. But it was really, it was actually, what a fun thing. They rented out a camp right as all the kids left.
Yeah.
And so they pay for the counselors, the camp counselors, to stay on, and all the staff. And then they invite everybody who's a member of WeWork, anybody who's involved, gets to come and do this party for free and see like big acts and play tug of war while they're shit-faced. I mean, it's like, it was really something.
So for this tour, like you're saying, you're going out and you're winging it a lot and you're just sort of improvising.
Yeah, and I mean, I think too, I've worked in Edmonton for, I don't know, almost 10 years. And, but I've never been to Winnipeg. I have a joke about Calgary, and I've never been to Calgary. The joke is that everybody in Canada makes fun of everyone in Edmonton, and everyone in Edmonton makes fun of everyone in Calgary, and everyone in Calgary is drunk and doesn't care what anybody says about them. Yeah. But I've never actually been there. And then Ottawa, which is sort of the first city on the tour, I've had like 3 or 4 friends that are stand-up comics be like, I love that city. You've got to go to Elgin Diner and order this. And somebody else texts me and goes, ask for the mushroom gravy. So, it's really fun that I get to go to these cities that other people have been to and loved. And this is my first time sort of touring all of Canada. Because I work in Vancouver because that's where we do Deadpools.
Yeah.
And Toronto is Kate and my favorite city in Canada. And so I've worked here a couple times. And I did Goon 2 with my buddy Jay Baruchel. Yeah. And then Montreal is like the Montreal Just for Laughs thing. But it's weird because I really know the West Edmonton Mall like the back of my hand. I can tell you exactly where the Spaghetti Factory is in relationship to the Sephora.
Yeah.
And so I've been.
Have you gone on the roller coaster there?
Yeah, of course, and I've ziplined. Haven't you?
I've done the bungee jumping at the water park.
Can you even believe it? And yeah. I've seen a killer whale eat a fish out of a woman's hand, and then walked into a PacSun and bought a T-shirt.
Edmonton, man.
That's crazy. There, it's fucking crazy.
Yeah,
I've been doing so much terrestrial radio. Every time I almost curse, I'm like, it's effing Canada.
Yeah, on this one you can swear as much as you like.
Thank God, I can say the C word.
You absolutely
Canadian.
Canadian. So, okay, so like, I guess one of the questions I want to get to was about the idea of, because you do so much stuff, stand-up, acting, writing, how do you creatively sort of divide
When someone wears all denim, is that a Canadian tuxedo?
This is very Canadian. I was anticipating you might ask. A Canadian tuxedo.
It is, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you are
I went dark denim.
Fucking denim, though. Even your shirt is denim.
But denim, but the coat is light denim.
It doesn't matter. It's all denim.
Yeah, that's true.
Which is not a negative thing. I think that's bold.
It's just a fact.
I'm wearing Abraham Lincoln socks.
That's true.
As an apology to your country.
Interesting.
things have been better.
You're a political guy.
Not really. I'm sort of an apolitical guy who's very philosophical, and I had this social mission that is now being obstructed by a political problem.
So you have to become a political person in some ways.
No, I mean, I think what I've really realized is even on this tour, people. I've understood this as I performed in Ireland and all of the United States, is that, we're actually kind of saying, like, tear your face away from these screens that are just constantly telling you horrible things and come and see a live stand-up show, and the stand-up is going to be funny. It's going to be about being funny. It's not going to be about if anything, I have one bit called Donald J. Grump, which is about how everyone is unhappy and happy. And everybody is kind of a lonely, scared human being that wants to have some sort of legacy or have the attention, be positive instead of negative. And that's not really even talking about American politics. That's just talking about what it is to be a human being and trying to get people to have perspective. Because it's a weird thing, too, where I was talking to Kate right before I came here. And it's a weird thing, too, where, it's just such a dark time, and there's so little that's funny about it, that the best thing I can do right now is just have people like laugh and do 10 minutes on cats and have people be like, that's like my cat.
Sure.
Because as soon as they leave, a lot of them are going to open up that news app and just want to kill themselves.
How much do you consume news? Do you have, like, every day? Are you looking at it, or are you trying to avoid it?
We've been trying to... I'm really big into this offline October thing that was started in Denver, which is where I'm from.
Yeah.
And, so we've started to toy with the idea of it's tough. It's like my business requires social media, but my personal life, like all of ours, is being kind of shredded by it. But I think that, every couple of days I'll sort of dive in. And then what really sucks is, like, on this press day and yesterday, everywhere you go, because I'll do like 8 to 10 hours of press a day, every single green room that you're in has a television playing nonstop coverage. In fact, one of the places that we went, I did a morning show, and in the back there was a huge TV screen with like every single news outlet.
Yeah.
And it just was like murder, sexual harassment, murder, terrorism. Donald Trump said this thing, did this thing, that thing. And it was a weird tableau of why none of that is necessarily helping at all. It was like seeing this mosaic of kind of the fear mongering that's happening, mostly out of fear. You know? And so I think a lot of comedians, the more comedians I talk to, I'll say, Sarah Silverman or someone, I'll say, well, what are you doing? Even Pauly Shore I saw at a party, and I was like, because he still travels and he actually mostly does red states.
Interesting.
And I said, what are you doing? He's like, I don't know. I mean, everyone is kind of like, I don't know quite how to talk about this yet. So we've been taking different angles, trying to do different stuff. But I think, a lot of people kind of welcome the ephemeral escapism that we're bringing to the table. And also this tour is called the Alternative Tour, which really it's JFL, so it should be called the Mainstream Alternative Tour. But it's, we're also providing a lot of silliness. It's very silly. Reese Darby is very silly. Nick Vatterott is one of the funniest working comedians today and very, very nonsensical. And then that's a good portion of what I do, while still being observational, philosophical, all the stuff that you're used to when you come and see a comedy show.
Well, how do you decide to do a tour like this? Are you like, I want to do stand-up again, and I find JFL? Or do they approach you and say, hey, do you want to do all of Canada? What are the mechanics like?
JFL came to me and sort of said, we want to do this alternative tour, and we think that you could be the marquee name because you're a lunatic and you also do stand-up comedy. And I had left Silicon Valley to do more stand-up, and so we wouldn't even be in the room. I would be on set today if I had sort of stayed and continued to do that show on autopilot. But instead, and there's a lot of people in my position that would be like, I just want to stay in New York. I'll do stand-up at night when I decide to and hang out with my wife. But 2 days ago, I kissed Kate goodbye and said, I hate to leave you, but I love that it's for Canada. And she loves Toronto, so she's coming up Saturday night, I think, just to like hang and be here. And, you know, I haven't been to Hamilton.
Hey,
I
that's
haven't
where we're
been
from.
to Red Deer, really?
Yeah,
Awesome.
man. Born and raised.
And so that's, you know, that's great because I just haven't ever been to there. Whereas in the United States, I play Appleton, Wisconsin, Omaha, Nebraska. I play like the Dakotas and stuff like. But in addition to the larger cities, and so this will just be a good. And we've never had a bad audience in Canada. I've had audiences that didn't love what I was doing because it was very strange to them on that evening and they were very drunk. But that doesn't mean that we didn't walk away from that being like, all right, I'm going to try and tailor it a little bit more, you know, next time I come into contact with an audience like this. But I would say that's 1 out of 10 times. 9 out of 10, everybody is there to have a great time. We always say Canadian hecklers are too polite to be called hecklers because they'll be like, hey, you f***ing suck, sir, and thank you for coming. Like it's like we
appreciate your time.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And also, I just think Canadians have a real sense of humor about themselves that other countries don't necessarily. Like Ireland was very like, talk about us, talk about how different we are, talk about how friendly we are. Canadians are just sort of happy if you tease them about being Canadian or if you're talking about, which I'll do at every single city, if you're talking about what your experience was that day, they're apt to be able to laugh at themselves, which a lot of Americans are not able to do.
Right.
Like people in the United States aren't always, San Francisco does not think it's funny when you make fun of San Francisco.
Well, you talk about going out on the road, which is like, it takes a lot of work ethic to like do a tour like this.
Yeah.
I think with creatives, whether it's like,
Hear that? Yeah.
yeah, well, you know, with creatives, whether it's music or comedy or anything, I think people get into it because shit is fun at first. And then at some point you hit a moment where it becomes a career or a professional, or you have to have a work ethic that sort of supersedes the fun of it. Was there a moment where you were like, oh shit, this is going to be a career and I have to sort of have a certain amount of ambition?
I think right after this interview was
That's
that
the moment when it's going to happen?
No, I don't know. Kate said to me this morning, because we were sort of talking about how, you know, if somebody doesn't mention it, all the press that I've done, they're sort of waiting to figure out if there's a time to dive into how terrible things are south of here.
Okay.
And Kate was kind of like, why are you there? Why do you have to do this? Not like you shouldn't be there, but just like, why is this happening? We're not together. You know, you're kind of doing press nonstop. And I kind of said, because that's sort of, everybody has to go to work. We work. We love, we live, we work.
We work.
But, you know, you got to go to work. I mean, I always think about how I used to work at McDonald's and Radio Shack and as a legal secretary, which is a very masculine job. They let me wear skirts on Fridays. You know, you got to go to work. You got to wake up and you got to go to work. And what's lucky about this job is that although it's really hard and the traveling is very, very grueling, every time you do a show that people love, it's just totally worth it. You can't possibly look back at it and be like, why did I do that? It's just, you've got, you know, if you've got hundreds of people going home kind of giggling, and then maybe in the next couple of days when they're at work and they're doing their 9-to-5 thing, if they sort of remember a joke and laugh. I have this joke about when you wash your hands, you're supposed to sing happy birthday because that's the amount of time it takes to hygienically clean your hands. And I do that every single time. But whenever I'm the only person in a public restroom and somebody else walks in, it just looks like I'm having the saddest birthday ever. And I have a lot of people that are like, every time I wash my hands, that makes me laugh. Because I think about you alone in a restroom being like, happy birthday to you. And somebody else walking in and be like, you're the first one to show up to my party. Sorry, it smells like shit. Like, it's like, you know, so that's the objective. Just like, you know, I did Transformers 4 was not an easy film to do for a number of reasons.
Did you read the script for that one?
I did not.
Okay.
And I don't even think they allowed me to. And, but I had a guy, I was like walking in Malibu for a wedding where Kumail Nanjiani was there. Is for a buddy of ours named Pete Holmes. So I was just like walking. You know, we live in New York now, so it's very different. Los Angeles, they'll sort of say, like, I'm like, how far away is it? Like, it's like 5 minutes by car. And I'm like, okay, cool. Well, I guess I'll just walk there. And they look at you like you're joking. They're like, okay. And so I did. I tried to walk to this place, and it was like a 45-minute walk because they all minimize how long you're going to be in your car there. And I was just sweltering heat, and I had worn like, well, denim, and that's always good in hot weather. And I showed up, and I was getting Mucinex for my wife, which is hilarious because I'm the Mucinex man, but it is the best product on the market, and we are breaking into Canada. But you know, I was like so just dying of heat. And I stopped in front of the CVS pharmacy, and this dude who was like, you know, doing basically maintenance, he was emptying the trash and sweeping up around this pharmacy. He came up to me, he's like, are you the guy from Transformers 4? And I said, yeah. He's like, oh, I love that. That's my favorite Transformers. And so I don't look back on that movie and go, oh, that was such a pain in the ass. And there were so many horrible days, and it was sweltering and awful. And I was being screamed at, and that. I don't think about that at all. I just think about that dude being like, that movie's so funny. And I got to meet the dude from that movie. And then later, remember this in California, later I saw him at a dispensary when I was buying marijuana, and I like bought him a couple of joints. I was like, I'm so glad you like Transformers. So now he has this story that the guy who was screaming all the time in Transformers 4 bought him weed. And that's just, he'll have that story forever. And so that's so awesome. I just did this movie with Kristen Stewart and Vincent Cassel, the coolest man in all of France. And it was called Underwater, and we're in these huge suits, and my suit weighed 110 pounds. And, you know, I passed out from dehydration several times. Like, it was a nightmare to make this film. Kristen Stewart would enter the makeup trailer, and the first thing she would be like, fuck this movie, fuck my life, fuck all of this. But at the end of every single day, she was like, I think we got great stuff today. This is going to be a great movie. And that's just the mentality that you have to have. And if you don't, then you're both fucking yourself over, and you're probably not like altruistically motivated. You're probably not doing this for the audience. You're doing it for yourself.
Well, you mentioned work. So you mentioned doing these jobs.
Hey, we work.
We work. But that's why some people have trouble wrapping their head around leaving something like Silicon Valley, maybe, because it's like, that's a gig. So like when you leave something like that, when it's like, hey, I got to do the job, I'm out on the road. What makes that different, and why are people having such a tough time sort of maybe understanding that?
Well, I'd argue that it was less of a gig. It had stability, but it was going to be like this season, it was just going to be a paycheck. And I just don't care about money. I mean, it's partly because I'm the motherfucking Mucinex man, but it's also because I just think the second that you start being motivated by money is the second that it just all falls apart. House of Cards reference, something like that. And, you know, this was an opportunity for me to, instead of kind of sleepwalking through another season of this character that I felt was becoming superfluous to the show.
Sure.
To just get into stand-up. And, you know, I produced this show called Gore Burger. My sketch comedy group Heavyweight has a show on Laughly right now that's really funny. And Nick Vatterott is actually in that sketch group. And, you know, I'm a stand-up comic. I think it's important to kind of, I think I'm a really, really good comic, but, you know, a tour like this helps make you become a great comic. And it was also just, you know, my wife is this kind of famous underground mixed media artist, like in New York and in London and New York. And me being in Los Angeles for 6 months didn't fit into the value system of, you know, wanting to be supportive to my wife, wanting to be a New York stand-up comedian. And then I was just interrupting production schedule with, you know, I would work 5 days out of the week and then go do stand-up in other cities on Saturday and Sunday. And if Sunday the flight was delayed or canceled, then Monday it would fuck with production schedule. And so I also wanted to stop doing that because I have 4 movies coming out and I'm just doing more film, and that already cuts into the stand-up and producing television and, you know, producing this movie that I wrote. And there's just so much right now that I had to kind of hit the brakes on something. And the thing that Kate always says is she quotes this David Bowie thing where it's like an artist is always at their best when they're just far enough out into the ocean that their feet are barely touching the ground. And so I just said to her, I go, what is the most stable thing that we can eliminate and what would create the most chaos for us? And it was leaving like one of the most successful television shows of the last decade. And I also think that's interesting. You know, I think it's going to change the show. I thought it was an interesting thing. It kind of broke the internet also because I did like an authentic exit interview. And people are like, they just didn't quite know what to do with that. And they also didn't understand that I was sort of fucking with the press a little bit because I was so upset after the election that I wanted to figure out, you know, this guy can stay in the news cycle just by saying crazy shit. And so you kind of can't escape him. And oh my God, that something just fell on me that it felt like God was like, stop talking.
Yeah, that
about
was
him.
that. And that's a perfect time to wrap it.
I know, right. At least it wasn't something heavier. There are heavier things. But yeah, I mean, you know, your question is right that people, I think a lot were like, why would you do that? Why? And I guess it was because it was the least obvious choice. And because I didn't want to be that guy that's like, I'll stay on this television show for 7 seasons and then own a boat or something. Like that just isn't interesting to me. I would rather perform at the Comedy Cellar or the Stand or the New York Comedy Club for $32 cash, you know, 5 times in one night and walk home with like a couple $100 cash and totally exhausted. But Kate's there when I get home and I've made, you know, a ton of people laugh. I'd rather do that than, you know, a television show that pays a lot and takes me away from this relationship with this woman who's the coolest person I've ever met, you know?
Yeah, man.
So that was that.
Is there a certain level, though, you need to live at I think that the difficulty people have is because it's so hard for people to find work or have their dreams come true. And in their vision of what maybe an artist wants, we work. In their mind.
The more I joke about it, the more it's a great idea and a better story. Keep going.
I like that retroactively those guys have now won you over with their amazing
I know, I'm
story.
liking it just because of this interview.
Yeah.
What were we saying? Sorry.
A certain level sort of monetarily you have to live at. So it's like you're like, I can walk away. And as a stand-up, you can always work, essentially, right? You'll always sort of have a gig.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the other thing is that I have never really felt like a part of Hollywood. I always
Sure.
thought I've kind of hoodwinked Hollywood into employing me as an actor because I'm not a very good actor. But I work really, really, really hard, you know, as an actor, as a comedian, as all those things. And so it really, yeah, I mean, I think, you know, it would be one thing if I was like, I'm leaving this because, actually, I don't know. I think even now it doesn't quite make sense, but it was absolutely the right decision. And, you know, in some ways, I kind of left a cake situation for a much, much harder thing, you know, which is touring and doing stand-up, because that's the kind of person I am. I'm just not a dude who's going to, like, collect the money. And, you know, I love Josh Brolin to death, but when he's not working, he's surfing in Venice. And that's just not me. When I'm not working, I'm working because we work.
Thanks for your time, man.
Thank you, man.
Welcome to The Dessert. Today it is just me and our pop culture aficionado Shane Christian Cunningham here because Max is on the road currently with his band. As you know from earlier in the show, he's in Cincinnati. So it's just me and you, Shane. What do you got?
Not a ton, actually.
All right, thank you for listening. the song just kicks in.
I was feeling better because when you and I came in to record off the top, we were without Max. And we were just sitting here, and it was like, all right, there's lots of stuff happen. And you were like, I just don't know what. I can't think of the right element to start off the top. And then once you started, we got something cooking. And I was like, maybe I can do something like that in the dessert, which is kind of like an improv thing. You know, we just came off the TJ Miller episode, and he's kind of like an improv expert. But some topics here. And I can explain why I'm derailed a little bit.
Okay.
But I recently saw my ultrasound of my child-to-be.
Hey,
This time.
that's exciting.
Yeah.
You didn't post it, though.
No, I think we're waiting to see if like there's these tests you run to see if it's if something's going to be wrong with it or not.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Alex told me not to share it yet.
Okay.
Like publicly beyond this podcast. That is. Nothing's funny about it. I'm just laughing in an awkward way, of course.
She's watching our numbers. She knows it's low enough that no one's going to hit.
We have a higher following on Instagram than we do on this podcast. But yeah, it was kind of a scary thing, because one of the big things I'm worried about is the child. For some reason, I have this irrational fear. It's actually a very rational fear of the child having a big nose. And then in the ultrasound, the kid has a big nose.
It's like all nose?
I'm going to show you, Mike.
Oh, okay. I
Like-
want to see this.
Just wait. Let me flip through. I don't want you to see one of my nudies.
Okay.
Look.
Okay.
Like, does that not seem prominent?
There's a nose there. Yeah.
Like, that's weird. I didn't know it could develop that early.
Yeah, man. Wow, that's a baby. That's exciting.
Yeah.
That's crazy. What's that disco ball above the baby?
That's its nose. That's a continuation of the nose. No, I think I actually know nothing about the human body, or especially a woman's body, so I'm not sure what is in there. But yeah, it definitely looks like a ball of some sort.
like a disco. It's like the baby's boogieing under the disco ball.
So there was that,
Yeah,
which was exciting.
that is.
And
I got excited seeing that.
yeah, so in honor of that, Alex actually got me a gift,
Wow.
which I kind of screwed up, and I hate this, but you know, like, I have obviously a litany of personality defects, and this is one of my worst one, is that I get caught up into things. But like, you know more than anyone, if I'm going swimming, I really, you know, get wet. Like I'll be in there all day. It's
Yeah,
a pool,
yeah.
proverbial pool. And I almost ignore everything else that's going on. So the TJ Miller digital dessert just posted,
Yeah.
and I'm all over it. I'm like checking out Reddit comments or replying to Reddit comments, seeing if anyone on YouTube has seen it. Friends are texting me about it. I'm texting them back. And Alex picks me up from work every day, my wife. She's trying to talk to me, but I'm zoning out and doing kind of an annoying habit where I'm pretending I'm listening, but really I'm kind of looking at my phone and watching like a comment. And somebody commented, "I very much enjoyed this." And I was like, yeah, like finally someone I don't know commented on the YouTube clip. And
Yeah.
I'm all excited. And then I'm like, okay, I'm listening to Alex tell her story. And then seconds later, there's another comment goes up, and I look at my phone, and it said, "This interviewer seems like an absolute cunt." So, and I'm the interviewer in this digital dessert. You know, and one of the good things about not being famous, in my view, is that when comments come in, I have enough time, and there's not enough comments where they can kind of blend in,
Right.
where I can actually individually respond. And I really don't like trolls, internet trolls, people who just have no other goal than to say the negative thing about the video in the worst, meanest way possible.
Right.
If you have something to say, at least make it constructive in some way. So I simply say, be nice. I'm not. Like, I'm not a cunt. Right?
Of course not. Of course not.
Mike just nodded silently.
No, of course not. I got you.
So then I'm like, okay, that's that. Issue closed. And at this point, Alex and I are home. And then another message comes in, and the guy's like, "Well, I just felt you were disrespectful to TJ Miller." And I'm like, this guy's he calls me a cunt because he thinks I'm disrespectful.
Right.
And I'm like, I'm going to go upstairs right now and just lose it on the internet. But Alex is still trying to talk to me as all this is running through my mind. And I'm talking to myself, coming up with comments to say to him. She's like, what are you doing? You're home, relax. I go, I'd love to, Alex, but I really have to go up and do some due diligence here and fight this internet troll. Because this is one thing I'm passionate about. And the last thing a troll thinks is going to happen is that the person who's in the video is going to confront them. And it kind of scares the troll when you respond.
Sure.
But Alex goes, oh, wait, I have a gift for you. And I go, what is it? As I'm angrily walking up the stairs, she goes, a gift. I go, I don't have time for your games. Just give me the gift or don't. Don't say, when you say you have a gift, and I say, what is it? Don't say a gift, all cutesy. And she's being like so lovable and so cutesy. And I'm thinking like it's a little crunchy bar, or like some Halloween arrows that have been left over from trick-or-treating. I think it's like, most of the time when someone says I have a gift, it's some treat, right?
Sure.
Like, it's still tasty, but not when you got a troll on your ass. So
I just love the Harrison Ford. I don't have time for your games.
So then she gives me a hat that I'm wearing right now.
Yeah. What does it say? Oh, this is the best, man. We got to get a photo of this. It says Papa Culture.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool hat and a thoughtful gift.
How did I not even notice that? We've been talking. Did you just put this on before we
No, I've
recorded?
been wearing it all day.
I totally missed
Yeah.
it. Man, I'm the cunt now. Yeah, sorry. Man, that's awesome. That's an amazing gift.
Yeah. So obviously, I'm like melted at that point, and I'm just like, oh man, I'm like, this gift is great. But now she's fired up. She's like, no, go write your comments.
Go forth.
And I'm like, okay. And then so I just go upstairs and I start, crafting a message, like how I overthink everything.
While wearing your Papa Culture hat?
While I'm wearing the Papa Culture hat. And then I call Alex up to help me edit it because I don't know how to like read and write. So Alex comes up to like kind of help me. But she's still being cold with me. And then I'm like, oh, come on, let's make up or whatever. And she's like, well, okay, it starts talking. But then I noticed that this guy has replied to my comment. And I'm like, out, get out of the room. So I'm being this Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde thing, which is really unfair to be to someone. And anyway, I ended up going back and forth. There's 10 comments now on this post. And me and this guy just
Wow.
went,
Are you replying from Shane?
Master 83, actually. No.
Your new handle? Because you have a history of just replying from Mike God Butch to people like Eddie Delasepe or other beefs you have on the internet.
I usually hit them from as many social platforms as I can.
Hey, man, you're the Papa Culture. That's it. That's all. That's our episode. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you to TJ Miller for coming on the pod, doing the long-form interview, and then also Shane's Digital Dessert. Please check that out online. You can find us at Mike on Much on Instagram and Twitter. Thank you to Jenna Gregory, Tara Cat for doing all of the artwork for us. The Mike on Much podcast is produced by Max Kerman. I am your host, Mike Veerman. See you next week if we don't die on the weekend.